I'm going to be teaching you about how everything works on this camera. I'm going to show you a lot of little tricks and little secret functions. Fuji's got a lot of little secret functions that I think are kind of interesting because they're shortcuts in how you can get stuff done. And so I'll be showing you all of those, giving you a very good list. Now with this class, there is a PDF, and there are a few things kind of from the class in the PDF. The main thing is I've taken the entire menu and I have laid it all out so it's nice and easy to see, and visual people like you and me can just kind of scan this to find items that we're looking for. Now I've narrowed the whole menu down to 2 pages, and what I've done is I have given you my recommendations on where some of these settings should be, because straight out of the factory it's pretty close, but not exactly where I think the camera should be. And so I give you some recommendations, and this is a good starting point. You're going to make your own tweaks and adjustments, and I think that's awesome. But if you want a good starting point, I'll at least give you that. And as I know, all of you are going to make your own changes. Down here I have the whole thing again, but without my recommendations, so you can put in your own settings and your own notes and whatever else you want in here. So this is going to come with the class. I also do have a page on some of the shortcuts in here, and we're not going to get into that right now. You'll see that as we go through the class there. So let me tell you more about what we're going to be doing in this class, because it's going to be a big class and there's a lot in it. I've broken the class down to many logical different sections. We're going to start off with a little intro to the Fuji X-T4 series. We got some people here who are new to Fuji and new to the X-T series of cameras. From there, we're going to do just a few basics for those of you who are still new in photography, or talk about the types of cameras and sensors. And then we get into the good stuff. We're going to talk about exposure and everything that you need in order to get great exposures. Then the other key one is focus. We'll talk about all your focus tools and focus operations in this section. This is one of my favorite. It's the drive section. Single, continuous, multiple exposures, interval timers, a lot of fun stuff. We then do a tour of the camera, looking at all the remaining buttons and dials to figure out what they do. We look at all the options for the viewfinder and the LCD monitor on the back. We take our first dive into the quick menu, where a lot of our quick, most frequent adjustments are made. This section is just on making movies, because the camera works in a very different manner here. We then look at the camera connections, all the input, output ports, memory cards, batteries, and flash. Take a quick peruse through some of Fuji's more popular lenses that you should know about. And then the next several sections are going through the menu, tab by tab. We're going to break it down. We're going to go through each item. I'll explain what it does and recommend where you can set it up for your best settings. And then finally, we end up with my field setup recommendations. And this is where I'll give you some tips and hints on how I would set the camera up for a variety of situations, and just things to be looking out for kind of in the overall sense of operating this camera. So, got a lot to cover in this class. And by the end of it, I'm going to say you're going to be an expert in this class, because you're going to know about all the features and you're going to have your camera completely customized to the way that you like to work. All right, let's talk about what is in this class. Well, this is a class on the X-T4. Duh, I know. We're not going into other things in photography. We're not going to be talking about composition. We're not talking about lighting. All that's important. Trust me, it is, but we're concentrating just on this camera, not all the accessories that you can hook up to it. We have more than enough to cover with just going with this camera. Now, my personal bias is that I like to take the highest quality pictures that the camera can take, and I like to be able to do so in a manual operation. That way I understand what's going on. And while the camera can do some automated art in a box type things, we'll explain it, and I'll show you how it works, and I'll show you examples of what it looks like, but we're going to concentrate more on understanding how to do everything manually in this camera, so you can repeat your actions over and over again, and you know exactly what you're doing with the camera. And finally, I don't know how much you know. What I do know is that I have a wide variety of people who watch these classes. There are some people who are top-of-the-line professionals, and they're looking to just kind of squeeze out that last 10% of the camera that they didn't know about. And I have definitely dug into the camera and will have that for those types of viewers. I also know that some people get into photography at some point, and some people buy a very good camera as their first camera, and they need a little help along some of the more basic terms. So being a teacher, I'm just going to err on the side of explaining it for most people. I do expect most people to have some level of understanding in here, so we're not going to cover everything. Now, the instruction manual that comes with this camera is actually not as big as many other manufacturers, and so it only takes about 11 hours to get through. I'm not sure exactly how long this class is going to be. It might be 5, 6, or more hours, somewhere in there. And I'm going to try to cover most everything most everyone would want to know about this camera. There's going to be a few things in that manual that I don't get to, some detailed specifications, some compatibility issues. And so feel free to dive into that if you need a little bit further understanding about a particular feature that I didn't go into. Let's talk a little bit about Fuji's history for those of you who maybe don't know about this. Fuji's one of the classic film companies. It has been around for a very long time. They are kind of most known for their film, at least for many years, because they made a lot of great films that were very popular around the world. They have made one of the most interesting collection of lens or cameras of any manufacturer out there. They have really gone all over the place in the types of cameras that they've made. They're very well known for a lot of their lenses. Large format lenses have been coveted for years. Back in the 60s, they were making medium format cameras. In the 1980s and 90s, they had 35 millimeter SLR. They had 120 cameras. They had autofocus rangefinder cameras that nobody had, panoramic 35 millimeter cameras, just some really fun and interesting things. Then when things went digital, they didn't really have a system in place. And they had sensor technology and they had certain color sciences that they were very good at. So what they did is they bought Nikon cameras from Nikon, and then they modified them, put in their own sensors, and then sold them as Fuji FinePix cameras. And people would buy these cameras, and then they would buy Nikon lenses to put on them, and they kind of look like Nikon cameras, but they had a completely different sensor in them. They had a different menu, and there was a lot of portrait photographers that loved these because Fuji was so good at making sensors, and their color science and their skin tones were just better than a lot of other companies. But that was a dead-end road for Fuji. So they came out with the X100, a little retro-styled point-and-shoot camera with a fairly large sensor, and people fell in love with it. So they made an interchangeable lens kind of based off of that idea, and that is the X series, the X mount system that we're talking about here with this camera. And it's grown and expanded quite a bit and become very popular since then. Not that long ago, they introduced their first medium format autofocus digital camera. Now, as I say, they have a long history in medium format cameras. So when it comes to doing medium format, they know exactly what they're doing. But now they've come out with several models in their medium format line, and they're growing that kind of right in line with their X series. And it looks like both of them are going to continue forward for quite some time. One of the things that's great about the Fuji X system is that we do have a pretty wide variety of camera styles, and we have a great collection of lenses. I will have to admit, I think Fuji's been a little bit all over the map in making different camera styles. They'd try like a XH1, and then we haven't seen a replacement for that, at least as of the recording of this, and the X Pro series. And so they have several cameras that could all be considered the top of the line, but with a different style and kind of geared towards a different type of photographer. But if you want something small and lightweight, they have a great system. I think it's great for travel photography or anybody who just wants a compact but high quality camera that they can really get in and manually operate. All right, let's talk about care and handling for a moment. This is not a waterproof camera, so don't take it underwater. It has very good weather sealing, as I'll mention in a moment, but it's not the best. And there's always something funny in the instruction manual, and so don't use in the presence of a flammable object or explosive gases. I think that's kind of obvious. One of my favorite is, well, you do have to be careful, die. You could die using this camera if you did something wrong, and I don't know what they would think of that, but don't eat the battery, stupid stuff like that. All right, the construction of the camera. This is a well-built camera. It is designed to be taken about outside, not designed to be dropped, but it is designed for good regular photography use. The weather sealing on this is pretty good. They say it's tested down to -10 degrees Celsius. It's good for rain and dust. It's got a lot of weather sealing on it. It's a type of camera that if it was lightly raining outside, I would not mind going out shooting photos for a short period of time. I wouldn't want to be out there for hours. It's not really designed for that. If you are going to be out in the rain or a very wet environment for hours, you'd probably be best to get a rain cover for the camera. Now, as far as the shutter life, one of the ways that we rate the durability of a camera is how many cycles of the shutter that the camera can withstand. And there's usually a posted statement about how long that shutter life is. And this is 300,000, and that is considered very good in my opinion. Older film cameras were around 50,000, and a lot of cameras now are at 100, 150,000. The very top end cameras are going to be 400,000 or 500,000. So it's not the absolute most durable camera out there in that regard, but it's not far off and should last most people many, many years. And just to be clear, it doesn't mean that the camera dies or stops working after 300,000 cycles of the shutter. It just means that's how long it's expected to last. You might get more, you might get less. All right, let's make sure that your camera is prepared for today's class. You'll need a battery charged, and it will take anywhere from 3 to 10 hours. And because we're dealing with USB charging, it can vary dramatically whether you're plugging it into a wall outlet or into some sort of kind of weak computer or tablet that you're charging it off of. And so we'll talk more about that as we get into the batteries and other attachments. You'll need a lens on there because we're going to take some practice photos in here and a memory card in there. Turn the camera on, which I will do right now. Next up is there's a very important dial right below the shutter speed, and this will allow you to change the camera from the movie mode to the stills. And while it's great to shoot movies, this camera is a still camera, and that's kind of the main area that we're going to talk about. Let me just get this to a normal exposure here. All right, so still mode and the movie mode right there. We're going to be in the still mode because we're going to just be doing still photos for right now. Over on the side of the lens, and there are some lenses that are different. This particular lens has a automatic aperture position right here. There are other lenses that have a marked aperture with an A setting on it. If you set either one of those to A, they're only going to have one. Set it to A, the camera will automatically control the exposure for you. On the shutter speed dial on the top, we can turn that to A, which is where I've got mine. And then on the front of the camera, if you turn that to S, the camera will be in single focus. We'll explain more about this later. And I'm going to go ahead and fire up my camera, make sure that it is working properly. And let's make sure I'm in the right mode here. That always helps. There we go. And now it is working. All right, hopefully your camera is as well. If not, go out, charge that battery, get a memory card in there, and get ready for the rest of this class. All right, so as we progress through this class, every once in a while, I'm going to be explaining something that we're going to talk about later in the class that's in the menu. But I know some of you like to make that change right then and there. And so you're going to get a menu reference box on screen, and this will allow you to stop the video, and you can go in and jump into that particular mode or whatever setting and make that adjustment. Because I might say, oh, we can reprogram this button to do this. And you might think that's great and want to do it right then and there. Some of you might say, well, I don't know about that right now. I'll kind of wait till I see later in the class. And then when we get later in the class, I'll go through that setting in more detail in the menu setting. Now, as I am in the later parts of the class, I may have to refer back to earlier parts of the class where I fully explained how a feature worked. And so you'll find a class reference on which class a particular topic is in. And so just be aware that you can jump around these videos kind of on an as-need-be basis. Generally, I've designed them so that we walk through them together the first time from beginning to end, but as you want to come back to review things, that's perfectly fine to pop around as you see fit. All right, so one of the important things on modern cameras is that they are run by software, which we call firmware, and this firmware gets updated by the manufacturer from time to time. Fuji has generally been a little bit more in the forefront of changing things over, and so they are very quick to fix a bug, add a feature, make a small improvement, And so we do see a lot of firmware adjustments and updates with Fuji. So let's make sure that we're kind of all working off of the same page, or at least we know where we're working. So in order to check the firmware on a Fuji camera, it's pretty easy. You press the display back button while you turn the camera on. So obviously the camera needs to be turned off. And let's go ahead and do that right now. So my camera's turned off. I'm going to press the display back button down here on the bottom, and then I'm going to turn the camera on. And there we go. There is my body version is at 1.2. So obviously the camera started at 1.0 and they've made some small adjustments. It's not a huge one, otherwise it'd be 2.0. There's also lens versions, which we'll talk about more in the lens section. And so if you want to check your body now, you can do so. If it's less than 1.2, I can guarantee you can go to Fuji's website and download the update. The idea is just go to Fuji's website, look for the firmware for the X-T4, download the appropriate file. There is a little bit more information at Fuji's website. And the idea is that you're going to take the firmware, put it on a memory card, install it in the camera, use slot 1, and then turn the camera on in the same manner. And it's going to recognize that you have new firmware on the memory card, and it will ask you if you want to update. You hit OK, and it takes a few minutes, and you got new firmware and maybe some new features on your camera. Now, you're going to be watching this video in the future, for me at least right now, and they might have something newer than 1.2. And they might have changed something on the camera, and some things might be a little bit different, but I would encourage you to get the update and take advantage of all their latest firmwares, because that's how you're going to get the best operation out of the camera. And when you're done with it all, you can go ahead and just flip the off switch and turn it off, turn it back on, and you're ready to go with kind of a new camera. All right, one other thing that we want to do is I want to reset my camera completely so that it's like it just came out of the box. Now, I know some of you have your cameras adjusted in ways that you like them, and you may not want to do this. But for those of you who want to get your camera reset the same way mine is, this is how you would reset the functions on the camera back to the factory default settings. You need to dive into the menu, and you're going to go to the Setup menu, User Setting, page 2 of 2, and there's going to be 3 reset options. So let's go ahead and do this right now. I'm going to go ahead and get my camera into the menu, and you kind of navigate left and right through the menu and up and down, and we're going to come down to the wrench. And in User Setting, we have a couple of pages, and we're on page 1 of 2 that we can see here. And we're going to come down to 2 of 2 and do Reset. And there's a few different options. The Still menu reset, kind of obvious what it's doing. I'm going to go in here and press OK. Now I'm going to go back to the menu. Rather than going down, I'm going to go up. And so you can kind of go the opposite way to get there a little bit more quickly. I do need to go up to User Setting, and then page 2 of 2. Reset, and we're going to do a movie reset as well. Go back into the menu. Can I go backwards here? Nope, that takes me up to the next menu there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, reset, and our final one is the setup reset. This is kind of all your setup functions in the menu. Reset this. Yeah, we're going to go with English for today. I don't feel like learning a new language right now. And so now we've got our cameras reset, and if you want to have them reset, our cameras will be exactly the same as we go throughout the rest of this class. All right, we've got ourselves off to a good start. There's a lot more to get to, so I hope you're ready to learn a lot about your camera.